Hey everybody, and welcome back. In the last video we put the steering wheel buttons on the steering wheel with the new airbag. If you had the factory radio you would have been done. However, in today's video I'm going to show you how to get those steering wheel buttons to communicate with an aftermarket radio. This is applicable to specifically the second gen Tacoma, but I'm guessing it's very similar on any of the 2000s Toyotas, the Tundra, the FJ Cruiser, the Highlander, the 4Runner. All of those should be quite similar. However, you will have to check compatibility. We're going to install a module and wiring, and we're going to get this guy talking and playing nice. Do you want to play nice with us? No, I don't. We're going to have to work on that. That's what we're going to do today. So here's what you're going to need to get that ornery guy playing nice with your new steering wheel buttons. First, we're going to divide this in half and we're talking about the module. This is the steering wheel control module. Put that part number up on the screen. That is compatible with my vehicle as well as my radio. It should be compatible with a lot of these 2000s Toyotas. You've got a data port, you've got two lights. When you plug it in, it should auto-program itself. It did for me. However, I'm going to show you later the customization you can do through that port. It's actually very cool. This is the interface. It's a 3.5 millimeter interface, very common on the back of these aftermarket radios. I know that's confusing, especially for somebody who isn't into this stuff, because this seems like an audio connector. However, it's labeled WR, and then sometimes they also call it SWC, depending on your model. This guy plugs right into here. Then this connector here will plug into this. Let's see if I can do it one-handed. There we go. Look at that. And then all of these here, only some of these, depending on what functionality your vehicle has, need to get hooked in. And for these steering wheel buttons, you're actually only going to need 3. And these 3 over here are the ones that you're going to need. This is a special harness, which means that you don't have to wire this all up yourself. So we're going to talk about that next. But lastly in the kit that you get with this module is an adapter. In case your radio doesn't have this port, you would just take this and you'd hook it into its harness, and then you would plug this into there. So we're not going to need that because this radio already has this port. So let's move over here. If you don't want to have to wire this all up yourself, this harness is supposed to be plug-and-play compatible. Now I say that because you're actually going to have to modify it a little bit. It came not working correctly. However, it's got some pins in here. These top connectors are for if your vehicle had an aux port built in so that you wouldn't have to wire the aux port separately. Now I don't have an aux port, so we're not even going to worry about those. We're going to cover those up. This is that part number as well. I'll put there up on the screen. So don't even worry about that, because we're talking about steering wheel controls. And for steering wheel controls, there's 3 wires right here. These 3 wires. Now I'm guessing you'd find those exact same 3 wires over here, and you could manually wire it up. This plugs into the factory connector. This plugs into the back of the module, just like before. Let's see if we can do it one-handed. Can we do it? We got it. There we go. And then this guy would go over here and plug in here. Then these would plug into power and ground, the same accessory power that turns on your radio. And then that's pretty much the whole setup. Now this seems a lot simpler to me than doing all of this wiring yourself, especially because this is only like 15 bucks and the module itself is like 70 bucks. However, this is a big but, okay? And I'm going to set this up on a tripod. This connector did not plug in correctly when I pulled it out of the bag. I had to take this apart and modify it because it would not clip in. I'm going to show you what happened, and I'm going to hope that this is just a random fluke, but perhaps a lot of them are being made incorrectly, and you'll need to know this for your install. So unfortunately, at least on my connector, the pins inside were too long, and so when I would try and plug it in, it couldn't push all the way in because the pins were actually hitting on the connector on the other side, and the clip was not reaching. So here's what you do to fix that. This is just a standard sewing pin I've folded over. You could also buy a set of these terminal keys. And then I'm going to take this out and remove it because I don't need it anyways. However, I've already trimmed all of these and put it back together for the video. Let me make sure that you can see this. It's going to be kind of hard, but there's slots above the pins. Let me see. You can hopefully see that there. And then you push that in there, and then I'm going to pull these out one by one. So there's that pin. Let's see if I can get this one in. There's that pin. And there's that pin. And so then what you would do is This is the measurement you're going to need, 7.5 millimeters, okay? You're going to take these and you're going to measure them down to 7.5 to where they start to taper. Again, it's going to be a little bit tricky to see, but you're going to go like that. So go ahead, and if they're too long, just trim them down until you have them the correct length. And then let's move on. Let's go ahead and step in and take a look at what we're working with. Now I know this is a lot, but don't get too frightened. You'll take out this guy here, it'll pull out, and then you'll also be able to just yank this and pull this out. There's one connector on the back there and two connectors on the back there. Then you'll use a 10 millimeter socket and you'll take these 4 bolts out, down in there, there, and in there, and then your radio will pull out. Now these are the factory connectors that go to those guys. And then these are the factory radio connectors here that the company, whoever put in that radio that came with the truck, installed all of that. So we're going to push all this out of the way, and we're just going to concern ourselves with this connector right here. Now if you don't see this connector, it's possible that it was already cut and put into the harness, in which case you're going to need to troubleshoot why your steering wheel buttons are not working. However, like this vehicle didn't used to have these. They didn't even do anything with this because there was no function of it. And so if you had an aux input, it'd probably be, I don't know, down here maybe somewhere. That would also be 3 more wires coming into this. I don't have an aux input. This is actually the first year of the 2nd gen. So here's this wiring harness that I talked about modifying earlier that wouldn't plug in originally. Well, once you modify and trim those pins to 7.5 millimeters, you can see now it will just slip in and listen. There you go. That's what you want to hear. So that saves you the trouble of cutting and soldering, as well as if you were to revert to a factory radio, you would still have your connector here. So then this will go into the module, which we already discussed. And then the 3.5 will go into your radio, which we already discussed. These two here, the power wires, you'll go ahead and hook this and this. It's flopping all over the place into, which I currently have flower pots on them because I took the crimp caps off, but you'll just hook those into there and there coming out of this guy here. And then that will hook up the power, and then that is pretty much it for the wiring install. So I'll get this thrown together and then I'll go ahead and show you. Here's how it looks all put together. We've got the steering wheel control 3.5 millimeter jack. Then we've got the power and ground hooked up. Going to the module, we've got the connector here. There it is back there next to the Sirius XM. And that USB cable that you see, I ran down to here so that I could interface with the laptop without taking the radio out. I got everything put back together. I'll put a photo up, but I actually had to cut a hole in the plastic to be able to fit all the cables because there's just even more now than there used to be. I'm going to do a quick demo of the buttons working. So as you can see, volume there is working. Let me get the music playing by skipping to the next song. As you can tell, skip forward and backward works. I've just got some copyright-free music on here. And so I can do the volume. And then mode is also going to work to go. There's Sirius. I don't have Sirius, but there's that. There's the regular radio. Now, if you were to press it once, that would go through your presets. If you were to long press it, it starts to scan, or seek, I think is what it's called, seek for the next station. And so that's working. And then we can go, I don't have Pandora set up, go back to the iPod there and get the music going again. But as you can see, all of these buttons work. And now I'm going to show you what you can do is you can configure these buttons with a computer. Now, when you plug this in, you're not going to be able to use the buttons while it's plugged in. You're going to have to do a key cycle before the module will start working again. But just keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off here. Then we're going to plug this in to here. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up the software and switch to the screen capture. So what we have here is the programs opening up. You can see there's a bunch of options. I'm only going to talk about the SWC steering wheel control configuration because all of these other things, the firmware is already updated and the help section is just for help, and these other things are for more advanced vehicles and different setups. So you'll get to this screen And on any of these tabs here, you can hit read and it will read in all of them. So we're going to do that. You can see this is a Pioneer radio and it identified it already. This was from the initial setup that was automatic. I never had to do this, but if it got it wrong, you could go ahead and change that. Then the buttons, this is just the default mapping. However, let's say you like volume up and down to be, oh, actually, I apologize. Volume up and down are the only buttons that you can't change. So I was going to say, let's do a different example. If you like seek up and down to be reversed, or if you want that to be something else, you could do that. But we're not going to do any of that. And then dual assign is the long press. So that's how we're able to use the seek button to also then do other things, as well as I have the mode button set for push to talk, which brings up Surrey. I couldn't show you that though, because if you were to bring up Surrey, it would have stopped the recording on my phone. And so let's say you wanted seek up to do something else or whatever, you have these options. Now, I did try play/enter and that did not work with my radio. And I also tried mute and that did not work with my radio, which was unfortunate because I kind of wanted to map mute to the mode source button, but that's okay. Other settings are things that aren't applicable here, and then that's just the help menu. So if you made your changes, you would hit right, and then you would go ahead, we're going to bring it back to the camera here. You'd go ahead, cycle the key on off, let it boot up, and then you'd be able to see your changes. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this all back together. I don't need to show that. It's just the opposite of how you took it apart. Well, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed and hopefully you learned something. It's not the easiest thing in the world setting up an aftermarket radio with one of the steering wheel control modules and all that, but not the worst thing either. So the wiring is done. The buttons all work. And I should have mentioned earlier that if you don't want to use a laptop and a USB and all that, when you first plug in the module and you turn on the key, it's going to self-program. There are two LEDs on the front, red and green, and they're going to flash a bunch of times. And once they stop flashing, it's already figured out your configuration. And for most people's setup, that's going to be totally fine. And honestly, the only things that I actually changed using the laptop was adding the push to talk as the dual mode function of the mode button. And if you happen to have the controls, the buttons out of Axxess, you already have a separate push to talk button as well as the hang up and answer phone buttons. So anyways, get subscribed. Go ahead and like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe because you never know. We got Tacoma content coming out all the time. Go check out my other videos on the Tacoma too if you're curious. We got the tailgate reinforcement panel. We have the video prior to this, putting the steering wheel buttons in. You know, I've done all types of stuff on all types of Toyotas. Have a good day. I appreciate it. Bye.